Let's get right into it. Number 15. The modest Queen Victoria. You picture Queen Victoria as the stern, black-draped matron who invented prudishness, right? The reality? In her younger years, Victoria was anything but solemn. She hosted lively dances, sketched witty caricatures of her courtiers, and delighted in practical jokes. Her courtship with Prince Albert was scorching. Her diary entries from their wedding night describe kisses again and again, and Albert's large whiskers. Delightfully un-Victorian details that would scandalize modern royal watchers. That austere, perpetual mourning image only solidified after Albert's death, when Victoria donned black and used state funerals to rally support for her monarchy. Before then, she was a vivacious party girl queen who probably outlaughed you at the last wedding you attended. Basically, the woman who gave an entire era its name for straight-laced respectability was once the life of the Victoria-era party. Number 14. Genghis Khan. Architect of tolerance? Yes, Genghis Khan built his empire by the sword, but he also pioneered one of history's most radical policies of religious freedom. Conquered Buddhists, Muslims, Christians, animists. Everyone was allowed to worship freely, exempt from taxes and forced labor. He even staged interfaith debates in his tent. This wasn't out of some sudden humanitarian awakening. It was cold, hard pragmatism. A stable empire needed internal peace, not sectarian bloodshed. By guaranteeing religious liberty, he kept the tax register full and the roads safe for trade. Basically, the guy who raised cities also laid down the world's first blueprint for multi-faith coexistence, provided you first pledged loyalty to him. Number 13. Marie Antoinette's missing cake quote. "Let them eat cake," is the line that supposedly immortalized Marie Antoinette as the ultimate out-of-touch aristocrat. Except she almost certainly never said it. That phrase appears in Rousseau's Confessions, written before she ever set foot in France, and was attributed to a great princess. Revolutionary pamphleteers slapped it on her to stoke public fury. The real Marie Antoinette, though extravagant, was more obsessed with her fashion and Hamlet at Versailles than mocking starving peasants. Her downfall came from a potent mix of xenophobia. She was Austrian, fiscal crisis, and collapsing monarchy, nothing to do with mockery of brioche. Basically, she was made the scapegoat for a revolution-ready populace with a deliciously false soundbite. Number 12. Einstein's failed childhood. You assume young Albert Einstein was a precocious wonderkind. In truth, he didn't speak fluently until age 3, earning worried glances from his parents. His early teachers labeled him slow. One even predicted he'd never amount to anything. He loathed rote learning, balked at authoritarian schooling, and flunked the non-science section of his first Swiss Federal Polytechnic exam. Yet his insatiable curiosity thrived outside the classroom. He devoured math and physics books on his own and spent hours daydreaming about riding light beams. That slow learner turned the world upside down with relativity. Basically, your kindergarten report card probably had more in common with Einstein's than you'd think. Type continue to get the next part. Number 11. Gandhi, not always the saint. You've plastered his face on posters of peace and nonviolence, picturing a humble man in a simple loincloth leading India to freedom. But in his early years in South Africa, Gandhi's views on black Africans were shockingly derogatory. He referred to them as Kafirs, a racial slur, and lobbied for Indians to be treated as distinct from, and often superior to, local Africans. He saw them as uncivilized compared to his own people. And in his personal life, he undertook extreme ascetic experiments, living on near 0 calories, sleeping on the floor, and most controversially, sharing his bed with young women, including his grandniece, as tests of celibacy. To his disciples, these practices seemed spiritual. To the rest of us, they border on bizarre and deeply uncomfortable. Yet this is the same man who orchestrated mass civil disobedience that toppled an empire without firing a shot. His legacy of nonviolence is rock solid, but the saintly iconography conveniently glosses over early racism and odd personal rituals. Basically, the spiritual icon you revere had views and habits that would raise serious eyebrows at any modern retreat. Number 10. Abraham Lincoln, the Great Depressive. You see him in that stovepipe hat, delivering the Gettysburg Address with steely resolve. What few realize is that Lincoln battled crippling depression, then called melancholy, throughout his adult life. He suffered deep, recurring fits of despair that sometimes left him unable to get out of bed or speak to visitors. His closest friends described him as the most unfortunate man they'd ever known. He grappled with suicidal thoughts after the death of his beloved son Willie, and he wrote about his own mortality in letters that read like suicide notes. Yet he carried this immense weight into the White House, using humor and self-deprecation to mask his pain. Scholars suggest his profound empathy, his ability to understand suffering, stemmed from this lifelong struggle. Leading a nation through civil war took extraordinary resilience, but it also demanded that he confront his own darkest thoughts every single day. Basically, the Gettysburg orator you admire was often feeling $5 short of happy. Number 9. Napoleon Bonaparte, the short story. You hear Napoleon and immediately think, little tyrant, right? He's the caricature of a short, angry general compensating with grandiose invasions. But in reality, Napoleon stood around 5'6" to 5'7" hens, that's roughly 1.68 to 1.7 meters, a bit taller than the average Frenchman of his era. So why the short myth? British propagandists of the Napoleonic Wars loved to lampoon him in cartoons, reducing him alongside giant British lions to belittle his image. Plus, his Imperial Guard were chosen for height, so standing among them made him look even smaller. He earned the nickname Le Petit Caporal as a term of endearment from his soldiers, not a jab at his stature. And yet the legend stuck. He became the poster boy for the Napoleon complex. He wasn't vertically challenged. He was the product of brilliant but malevolent marketing by his adversaries. Basically, he was average height, but he had one of the biggest PR problems in history. Type continue to get the next part. Number 6. George Washington's wooden teeth. You've probably heard the charming myth. George Washington, America's stoic first president, suffered from terrible dental woes and wore a set of clunky wooden teeth. It adds a rustic, relatable touch to the founding father, right? Well, prepare for a dental reality check. George Washington never had wooden teeth. His actual dentures were far more grotesque and far more complex than simple wood. Washington began losing teeth in his 20s, and by the time he took office, had only a single natural tooth left. To replace them, he commissioned multiple sets of false teeth crafted from materials like ivory, often hippopotamus or elephant, human teeth. Some purchased from enslaved individuals, animal teeth, lead, brass screws, and gold springs. These dentures were custom carved and painfully stiff, far from the wood many imagine. So where did the wooden teeth myth come from? As ivory aged, it absorbed tannins from Washington's beloved port wine, gradually staining a deep yellowish brown, eerily wood-like in appearance. Observers unfamiliar with dental materials likely assumed they were carved from oak or cedar. Basically, the image of Washington gnawing on cherry pie with oak jaws is quaint folklore. In truth, he suffered decades of agonizing dental pain, wearing Frankenstein sets of ivory, human fragments, and metal that made him nearly unrecognizable.